Jack Parham was born in 1895 at Norrington Manor in Wiltshire, where his parents were tenant farmers. Publicly educated at nearby Sherborne, he recorded seeing his first aeroplane in 1911 when Monsieur Vedrine flew over the school in his Borel monoplane. He joined the army as a regular subaltern, and after training spent a year on the Western Front. He was then posted to Salonika to fight the Bulgarians, and where a Greek saboteur stole his comb. After the war he stayed on in the regular army, and in 1919 had his first flight in an RAF DH-9. Unusually, it was in Port Petrovsk in Dagestan, where he was involved in skirmishes against the Bolsheviks. He was, in his own words, reduced to matrimony, and then he and his wife moved out to India for several years, raising a family. They returned home in early 1933, and Jack had determined to take a few flying lessons just to see what it was like. He was one of the first people in Britain to learn to fly on an autogyro at the Sierva School at Hamworth, where his instructor was Alan Marsh. Jack learned on the Sierva C-19 and gained his licence in June 1933. In the next 2 years he did but 17 hours flying, including converting onto the new Sierva C-30. Flying autogyros was getting expensive, and there was another baby on the way. He decided to do a few hours in a Moth at high post before finally chucking it, but thankfully fate had a different outcome. He saw an advert in his weekly copy of the aeroplane. Aeronca monoplane, certificate of airworthiness to February 1936, single-seater, 24 horsepower, £95. The final bill came to £105 with a new certificate of airworthiness. A sporting aunt stumped up £100. Jack retained a £5 share. He also went to Hanworth to have a little bit of dual instruction in one of the new Aeronca two-seaters that were by then being imported. He didn't much care for it, saying, "Far too blind," as written on this photo. In early October 1935, Jack travelled up to Heston to have a go in his new machine. He would have liked a briefing, but all he could find out was that Mr. Jones, who had test flown the machine, said he felt like a bloomin' bird. He tried a few fast straights across the aerodrome. Takeoffs were good, but landings ended with kangaroo bounds. He tried some more after tea, with better results, and was delighted to find that the flying had only cost him 3 shillings and sixpence in fuel and oil. About a week later he returned to Heston, and after a few practice landings he headed off southwest down to Borden and the battery landing field, where he had built a shed. Gunner Whitehouse had moved the cows to the corner of the field. As Jack recorded in his book, "I did quite a decent landing. She fitted into the shed like a mouse into a trap. It shut up without sticking. What a Sunday." Building that shed caused some trouble. The field was only used a couple of times a year by RAF Army Cooperation flights, and Jack's commanding officer, a brigadier, had given him tacit approval to build the shed. Mr. Bone, the War Department warden, was none too pleased to discover the 4 holes dug in the southeast corner of the landing field. The Army Council got involved, but it was all right in the end. Field Marshals Archibald Montgomery Massingbird, Chief of the Imperial General Staff, a fellow gunner officer and a rather flying-minded one too, gave permission. Now Jack could get on with learning his own machine. She generally started well from cold, but could be awkward when hot. Local flights at first, then as confidence grew he started going further afield, including several flights to his old home some 50 miles to the west. He enjoyed his bird's-eye view of the world, following old Roman roads, earthworks and the like, and noted that many things lost to the man on the ground were easily seen from a few hundred feet up. On one flight he got lost, very lost, and had to fly on until he found a railway station and read its nameboard, Mitcheldever. After that he fitted a compass And he also made a self-expressing stethoscope, a sort of early version of a variometer, to tell whether he was going up or down. Jack did a lot of flying. Between the 1st of October 1935 and the 16th of July 1936, he flew 113 hours on 118 different days. On that same 16th of July, he headed off from Borden towards Lark Hill and the School of Artillery to have tea and talk shop. A few minutes later, passing 4 marks, there was a metallic click, followed by a terrific bang and tremendous vibration. The starboard connecting rod had broken, departing the aircraft and taking with it the piston, gudgeon pin, and a great deal of the starboard cylinder. To this day they lie somewhere in 4 Marks Wood. Jack glided down without further trouble. HE was undamaged, but the engine, or what was left of it, was beyond repair. They dismantled HE, and Jack towed the fuselage back to Borden behind his Austin 12. The wings followed on in an army lorry. But what to do now? He considered selling her as was, or fitting a brand new Aeronca Jap overhead valve engine, but decided on neither of these. Instead, he turned her into a glider. The conversion, which involved the illicit use of an army workshop, took place during the winter, with bungee launch trials being held on the army camping ground the following spring. These trials were very successful, with only small modifications being deemed necessary. The only problem was the lack of suitable gliding hills at Borden, but of course there was a suitable hill at Jack's old home in Wiltshire. So Jack constructed a suitably large wooden trailer to tow behind the Austin 12. On the 15th of May 1937, the wind blew strong from the northeast. Jack and his helpers took the aeroplane up to the Downs and, after an hour or so of messing around rigging, launched. It was Jack's first soaring flight, and astonishingly, he managed 63 minutes before finally running out of lift and tobogganing to a halt at the bottom of the hill. On hearing the great news, Jack's friend Tracy, a fellow officer similarly afflicted with the flying bug, sent him a telegram. It read, "Terrific, stop. Per Aeronca ad Astra." Jack later wrote, "In my wildest dreams I never expected that I, a novice at gliding and on a demotored aeroplane, would soar for over an hour. I don't remember anything which has given me greater satisfaction." As the European situation worsened, Jack's work in the army intensified, and he never managed another flight like that. He gave the glider to the Dorset Gliding Club. Jack wrote an amusing article about the Aeronca called HE or the Mug's Companion. It was published in a military magazine. And after that, she was gone. But as Jack said, good old HE, she didn't owe us much. Jack continued flying until 1939. An enthusiastic member of the Royal Artillery Flying Club at High Post, he expounded the virtues of using light aircraft for targeting and aerial observation, as he was steadily promoted through the army hierarchy. When the Second World War broke out, Jack went to France as part of the British Expeditionary Force, in charge of a Royal Artillery Field Regiment. Like 1/3 others, he came back via Dunkirk, but not before winning the DSO for masterminding and leading a successful counterattack. By 1942, the Royal Artillery had its own air observation posts run by the Army Air Corps, thanks in part to Jack. He was awarded the CBE and a bar to his DSO in 1943, and then played a major part in planning the Royal Artillery requirements for the invasion of Normandy and onwards. By the end of the war, he was a Major General. In 1949, in the New Year's Honours List, he was awarded the Companion of the Order of the Bath. He retired later the same year. He moved to Hintlesham in Suffolk, where he'd lived for the rest of his life, and spent his retirement painting, writing, hunting, sailing, and messing around with experiments on things that intrigued or interested him. One such project was the building of a Cayley glider, which after a small amount of tweaking flew magnificently. He also built a catamaran with a good turn of speed. It was of unusual construction, being made from old aircraft drop tanks. Even more unusually, it had retractable undercarriage, and Jack used to like sailing it hard at the shore, and when disaster seemed inevitable, lowering the undercarriage and rolling harmlessly up the slipway. Jack Parham died in early 1974. He left his old friend Tracy a small bequest with a rather amusing caveat. He also left a manuscript to a book that he'd written in Burma just after the Second World War. His family published the book in 1983 as Flying for Fun, an Affair with an Aeroplane. It's a small book, but for some of us it's been deeply influential.